Have you ever tried to record drums and the results were mediocre? The brand new Beat Kit by Lewitt makes it easy to get great results and is exactly what you need to start recording or amplifying your drums with fantastic sound. It includes 4 selected microphone models developed specifically for drums with dynamic and condenser capsules. With the new Beat Kit, you can easily sound better than ever before. Visit lewitt-audio.com and get your Beat Kit now for $449. For advanced setups, Lewitt's got you covered with the Beat Kit Pro, a professional 7-piece drum microphone set. Lewitt, make yourself heard.
Welcome to Live from My Drum Room, episode 97, with my guest, the great Clem Burke of Blondie and many other bands. And so, without any further ado, please welcome the great Clem Burke. He could be hanging on the telephone. There he is.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm great, Clem. It's great to see you, man. Thank you for doing this.
Sure. Pleasure.
You've been a hard man to track down these past few months, so I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, things really began to take off for the band when the pandemic kind of let up a little bit. You know, we titled our tour Against the Odds because, it was due to begin in, I guess, in 2020, and then, of course, the whole world went crazy. So we had to postpone several times, and then everything kicked into full gear back in April. We did a arena tour in the UK, 15 arenas sold out.
Wow.
We have an amazing audience, amazing fan base in the UK, and the guitarist Johnny Marr was gracious enough to be our opening act or our special guest on the tour, and was very successful.
That's great,
So,
man.
so I've been on tour basically since April. We just kind of stopped in Huntington, New York. I think about 2 weeks ago it stopped for a while.
Fantastic. And thank you again for, you reached out just before your show here in Boston, and I wasn't in town, unfortunately, and I'd have been there in a heartbeat. So thank you for thinking of me, and I'm sorry I missed it.
Sure.
But
we had a great gig there. Really great gig.
Yeah, I heard it was great. I remember it being I was thinking about you because I remember it was a really nice night and you were out on the water there, and I thought, wow, it's a perfect night to be at a show. So yeah.
Yeah, it was a good night. It was good. The whole tour was great. The band is kind of like a super Blondie at the moment. We have a few new people in the band. Chris Stein, my longtime partner, guitarist, not really able to tour due to health reasons. He's been very active in other parts of the Blondie organization, but we replaced him with a guitarist called Andy Blacksugar. And then right at the last minute, our longtime bass player, Lee Fox, had some issues with his health, with his back. So I called up my longtime friend, Glenn Matlock from the Sex Pistols.
Sure.
And Glenn played bass on the tour. So it was kind of like we had the element of surprise. People didn't know what to expect. So the band was a little different.
Yeah.
We all enjoyed it.
But you had a bass player at least that you've been playing with for a long time. So that must have been good for you to not have a whole different bass player that you'd never, do a cattle call and have somebody come in that, you hadn't played with. So that must have given you some comfort there.
Yeah, well, Glenn and I have been longtime mates, and we actually had a couple other bands together along the way. One was called Slinky Vagabond with the guitarist Earl Slick.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Then we had another band called the International Swingers for a while. And Glenn and he has a new album coming out, and I played on a few tracks on that that I recorded, via files during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it was great to be with Glenn. He's a longtime friend.
That's great. That's great. And talking about Against All Odds, that's in conjunction with the release of the box set that's been out since August now.
Yeah, Against the Odds. I think it came out August 28th. And it seemed, I think I actually came up with that title because, it really had to do with having any kind of real success, in the music business is very much against the odds. And when we look back now with this archival box set we just put out in conjunction with Numero, the label Numero, and with Universal, we had to go through all the stuff that was in the vaults, especially the basic tracks and outtakes. which I really enjoyed listening to. Kind of really brought me right back into that time and place in the studio, especially with the second and third albums that we did. And so to carry that theme on, the tour being canceled several times, we named the tour Against the Odds, and it just kind of all lined up with the release of the box. Actually, just about lined up, because the box came out just as we stopped touring. But we enabled us to kind of go deeper into the Blondie catalog for the tour.
Yeah.
And play almost a lot of the songs in chronological order. And it was really good. It was unexpected by a lot of the fans of some of the earlier stuff that we reprised during this tour. So it all kind of made sense. And the archive box is being really well received.
Yeah, that's great.
We all spent a lot of time putting it together.
Fantastic, man. That's great. And that's exciting that you guys, were able to go out and do this tour too, and I always remembered how big the band is in the UK. I mean, it's always had this like UK vibe to it, and great. You guys can still go over there and do, 15 sold out arenas, man.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's when I first got my endorsement deal with that Premier drum kit that you have sitting behind you there.
Yes, sir.
Due to the success of the band in the UK and the early tours, I was using, Premier loaner kits and really, really liked them a lot.
Yeah. So I was going to, Pat Petrillo, our old friend, was hoping to join today live, but he's not able to, but he wanted me to mention the Bridgemen Drum and Bugle Corps that you were a part of. And I knew you had some drum and bugle corps background. So just maybe talking a little bit about how that influenced your style. And because I mean, I hear, you have an incredible feel and incredible taste, but there's definitely chops in there. Like you have, you can tell you've got like some serious shit when you want to really let loose with rudiments and stuff. So, I mean, do you feel that was a big part of how you grew as a drummer, and playing in bands like Blondie or some of these other bands you've been part of?
Well, my background with the Drum and Bugle Corps certainly was an education. I learned basic rudiments, and also, the endurance of, marching and playing the drums. I actually wound up on rudimental bass drum in the end, which is pretty rigorous, doing all the rudiments with two giant, well, what a rudimental bass drum player has to do. I think maybe Billy Cobham was a rudimental bass drum player back when.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And I certainly got a lot of my chops. And simultaneously, I was in my rock and roll bands in high school as well. I mean, I actually came down to where I had to make a choice whether I was going to continue in the drum corps or was going to get more serious with the bands that I was in, because I was playing quite often during my teenage years with the two bands that I had. I had one band in my freshman, sophomore year, and another band junior, senior year. But yeah, the drum corps background definitely helps tremendously to this day. And I learned a lot there. There was a lot of rigorous exercising, playing, repetitiveness and just memory, because you're not really reading when you're doing, you have to memorize the charts and things like that. So yeah, I was happy to be involved in that back when.
But and so that was a question I was going to ask you. Is so I mean, you learned to read music as a part of being in the drum corps, and is that something that did you ever find a I wouldn't say a use for it, but did you find that you were able to sort of implement that in any way, like in kind of as you evolved into what you became now as a rock drummer?
Well, interestingly enough, I spent some time playing with Nancy Sinatra, several years ago. We did some recording and we did several tours. And of course, famously, Nancy's main drummer was Hal Blaine.
Sure.
And, Nancy has all her charts for each of the instruments to all her songs, including Hal's charts with the stamp Hal Blaine Strikes Again. And I was able to follow along with Hal's charts. I mean, not read them extensively, but as I could follow along, and that was a help going back to the drum corps. And
that's cool.
Yeah, it was really cool to see Hal's charts. Really, as you know, Hal was a great guy and all that. But Nancy had all the charts, all the all the history of all her music, was there and on file. So it was great to see that.
That's cool. And I just wondered that because, I wouldn't think, I would think a lot of what you do, you come up with parts and when you play in a band, you memorize parts but at the same time, if you said some of your like when I listen to some of the things you do, and I told you, offline, I've been really digging into like the Blondie catalog, leading up to us talking today. And like one of my favorite things you do is when you go to the 16th note thing on the hi-hat in Heart of Glass, when you go to that during that bridge,
Right.
and it's that subtle, and I just wonder if that's being able to read music would give you a leg up on sort of charting that part and learning that part when you go into to record it. You know what I mean? Like remembering, not having to remember so much stuff, but I mean, you obviously you have a great memory. You can remember these parts because you play them live. You've been playing them for 40 plus years. So
Yeah, well, our musical director with Nancy, the famous Don Randy, keyboard player of the Wrecking Crew, et cetera, owns that Baked Potato Club in LA.
yeah,
He basically it's referred to me as having elephant ears. So I took that as a compliment.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I think I seriously had heard that either about you from or maybe when we talked about it one time, you indicated that you're able to remember a lot of this stuff, that
Yeah.
you can hear, and that's huge, being able to just,
Yeah, a chart is always helpful when you go into a session if the chart is presented. Not that I can read it verbatim, but it gives you a little roadmap, obviously.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the first time I saw you play, well, I guess the first time I saw you play was maybe in the 90s, but I'd seen you play many times on TV and realized that you play like our friend, the one and only Ringo, and,
Right.
playing a right-handed kit and, playing with your right hand on the hi-hat and then leading your fills with your left hand. And I was just going to ask you, like in drum corps, is that when you kind of discovered, well, I guess when you started playing drums, you must have discovered that, right?
Well, no, that's an interesting thing because when I was in drum corps and also when I was taking lessons, that never really did come up. And I think that has to do with playing traditional grip. Because I find when I play traditional grip, I don't necessarily lead with my left hand. It never
No
really
kidding.
did come up when I was getting instruction. It just kind of evolved later on, strangely
Yeah.
enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, yeah, it's interesting that you'd think it would have come up at some point, but no, because if you're doing especially drum corps, you're doing whatever
Right.
you're doing, the exercise or the chart to the song, you're starting on the right and right, left, and playing rhythmic cues or 5-stroke rolls, et cetera, paradiddles. You're just leading, basically with your right. And I think, yeah.
I
Funny.
suppose if you're holding the stick traditional, like you say, then it would be kind of hard to versus match grip, hard to sort of start a fill
Exactly.
in that.
Exactly.
Did you ever
Yeah.
consider? Oh, go ahead, Clem. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all right.
I was going to say, did you ever consider when you were younger switching to left-handed? When you realized that you had this dominant left hand
No,
that you
never
didn't?
did. Even when back in the day we would play at CBGB with Johnny Thunders and the Heartbreakers headlining, and I would use the drummer who was actually a big influence on me, a guy called Jerry Nolan. Some people I'm sure have heard of Jerry Nolan. He was the drummer in New York Dolls, and his kit was, he played a left-handed kit, but I would move it around to the right-handed kit. Yeah.
Yeah.
It never really, it was just, I think it's a good attribute now to have. It just makes my playing a little different, as it does make for, Mr. Starr there, Mr. Starkey. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. You had great foresight. That's what I was going to say, is that I started off playing on a right-handed set,
Okay.
open-handed, and then
Right.
and someone said, well, you should switch and switch it around. And I wish I'd done what you did and actually learned to lead with my right hand and have a strong left hand. Because I think you're right. It gives you a whole different approach and flavor. When you play those fills, it's, they just have this whole other thing. There's this mojo there, that's.
Yeah, it does. And but if I go around the drums, I just end up on basically essentially a double hit on the, on the right, on the left hand to go around to be able to crash with my right hands,
Yeah.
like an extended paradiddle.
Yeah, and you probably don't even think about it anymore, right? I mean,
Right,
it's
right.
probably so
Yeah.
natural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I do think about is leading with my right quite a bit, because I try to do that a lot,
Yeah.
to have that ambidextrous aspect to my playing. And a lot of times, if I'm doing 16ths, I'll try to lead with my right, but it's very different. It's a whole other world when I lead with my left, especially when I'm doing 16ths on the hi-hat. I have so much more versatility as where I can move around, you know, leading with the left. So, but I do try to lead with the right quite a bit, just to balance out my limbs, so have them
Yeah.
both be, being able to articulate what I need to do either way
So
sometimes.
I think you answered my question. So when you like in Heart of Glass, for example, when you go to that 16th note pattern on the hi-hat, and it's a hand-to-hand thing that you're playing, right?
Right. Yeah.
And do you lead that with your
I
right?
lead with the left
You lead
usually.
with your
Yeah.
left.
Yeah.
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 Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I got to try that.
Or
I
I
gotta,
mix it up, but mostly leading with the left. That's the natural way to do it for me.
yeah. Man, listening to those songs again, I mean, it's I know I speak for a lot of people, I'm sure, that are watching too. The sound of your drums, there was just such a great for lack of a better description, analog sound that you got from your drums. They just sound so natural and big and organic. Cymbals sound fantastic. I'm thinking you were probably playing the A Zildjian, like probably medium or thin crashes back then.
Yeah,
Yeah,
A's. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
A's. And maybe even
That's what I
yeah,
use now. I use A's again now. I was
you do.
using A customs for some time, but I'm back to A's.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're great. They're great symbols. Yeah.
Now that
And
they're a little
I had a
thinner, yeah,
bunch of those the vintage ones that came out for a little while. I
right.
think you guys actually sent me an Armin symbol when I got inducted into the Hall of Fame that you had everyone sign, which you were nice
Yeah,
enough to
yep.
send to me, which I treasure. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Congratulations on that. I know that was a little while ago, but
Yeah, it was a
but
while ago now.
but
Yeah.
no, but worth mentioning, man. That's Hall of
Yeah.
Fame.
Yeah. It's funny enough. I've been involved with and played with actually four bands now that are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The most recently, my friends Annie and Dave from Eurythmics are being inducted this year. And,
Right.
I spent quite a bit of time playing with them in the 80s. And, right before the Blondie tour, I filled in for my friend Gina Schock in the Go-Go's
Yep.
and did a handful of gigs with the Go-Go's. And they were inducted into the Hall of Fame. And then, of course, famously, I briefly played with the Ramones. So Blondie, Ramones, the Go-Go's, and Eurythmics are all bands and people that I know, friends of mine. Just great to see that they're in the hall, and yeah, it's great. The Hall of Fame thing was quite an honor, quite
That's
an
great,
honor.
man.
And the people there are really nice. That people that run the place are great.
Yeah. Yep. I was thinking about that too, how I met you in the late 80s, early 90s. I remember us talking at a NAMM show, and must have been right when I started at Zildjian or not long after. And I think it was at a time when Blondie was taking it was like the late 80s. Blondie was
Yeah,
taking a little bit of a break, and you were playing
right.
with the Romantics. And I remember, thinking, what a cool, you said, you were just very sort of nonchalant. I said, so what are you doing? And you said, well, I'm playing with the Romantics now. And I'm like, oh man, I'd kill to do that gig. I love that band,
Yeah, it's a
and
rocking band.
it's
Yeah,
a rocking band, and you, I feel like there was never a time whenever I would see you until, Blondie sort of restarted up again in the 90s that you weren't doing something, as you said. I mean, you were like always a working drummer. Not an
yeah.
easy thing
Well,
to do. And,
yeah. Well, Blondie was the launching pad for all of us, and I was able to, due to the notoriety of the band and people like us appreciated what I did and the success of the band, and I was able to kind of use that as a jumping off point to continue my career in the music business. And yeah, the Romantics, that was a fun gig for me. I was involved in a lot of other things while I was doing that with them as well, so it all kind of balanced out. But I never stopped playing. Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, I think Blondie certainly gave you a platform to really showcase what what you got, what you have, which I
Yeah.
think
Well,
is great.
yeah, well, when we started out, we were essentially a trio, with Debbie up front, but the band was just the guitar, bass, and drums. So it gave me quite a bit of room to, you can make the analogy of other trios, obviously the Who and things like that, where there was a lot of room to play the drums and kind of connect the dots with the arrangements and kind of bring certain features that I did into an arrangement that actually became part of the song, and
Yeah.
it's because there was a lot of open space, in the early days.
Yeah. And again, I was gonna ask you that, and I always assumed that those parts, that these like killer drum parts and Blondie tunes were, there was parts that you came up with. It wasn't, um,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
wasn't a
pretty much.
producer or
Yeah,
a songwriter saying, yeah,
yeah, pretty much,
yeah,
especially early on. Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, something like Union City Blue later on with the drum fills at the beginning, or Dreaming, or things like that. It just kind of just like coming up with parts. Yeah.
yeah. Dreaming. Okay, I'm glad you mentioned Dreaming. I was coming up on my notes here because that song is, again, I always loved it, and just listening to it while I was out running, it's a ridiculous song for a drummer. I mean, a ridiculously great song.
Yeah, it's a
for
great
drumming.
song to begin with, and yeah.
It's great. So is that like an homage to Keith Moon in a way? Is that like your kind of,
Yeah, you could say so, but also I think our producer at the time, Mike Chapman, who produced the first album he produced with us was Parallel Lines, which was our big breakthrough record in the States. And when he came in to do that record, he was very particular about how he wanted us to work together, and he wanted every song on the album to be a hit. And so, he had a certain way of making records, which I enjoyed, but he would really bear down on the arrangements, and we'd all work together and make things as to the point as possible. And I think with the success of Parallel Lines, when he came back to do the second album that he did with us, E to the Beat, he kind of used a reverse psychology on me, especially in something like Dreaming, which kind of like I kind of had free reign to just go wild on it. And it was actually, I always mentioned, it was kind of a run through. And then by the time it was completed, testing the drums, going around the drums, and just kind of having fun with it. And everyone said, "Oh no, that's the take." And it might have been first or second take.
holy
I was
shit.
amazed I was as surprised as anyone.
It's
But
got that
yeah, that's
fresh
how.
sound.
Yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
overplaying in a good way.
Oh, and it's a yeah. And what you just said, Clem, yeah. I mean, you could see that, like if you had to play that 5 times, by the
Yeah,
fifth time, it would have probably been hard to have that like that excitement that you have throughout
it
that
probably
song.
would have gotten a little more refined. But
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, I still have room to do whatever I choose to do when we play that song live. It's kind of like a high point of our set a lot of times, and it's
yeah.
always fun to play. It always gets a great response.
The part where you're playing, you're playing the groove like on the floor tom, like
Right, in the
riding the floor
bridge, yeah.
in the bridge, yeah. And that kind of, not to say it's you're, but it's almost like an homage to the Ramones too. Like it's got all these different sort of, like I'm guessing like influences that you've had, and just. But I hear so much like Keith Moon in that, just in the verses, just the drumming, all the
Yeah.
fills.
Oh, I mean, I was influenced by Tommy Ramone, the drummer in the Ramones. I was influenced. I think everybody back when we all were playing at CBGB, the Ramones and the Talking Heads, and Patti Smith and people like that. I think we were all influencing one another because we were all in the audience for each other's shows early
Sure.
on.
Yeah.
And picking up on different things that people were doing. And back in the day, we used to cover songs in Blondie. We would cover Ramones songs, we would cover songs by television and things like that. And there was a certain, back to the roots of rock and roll aesthetic involved with all the bands there, but everybody was doing it in their own particular way. And I think we were all influencing one another. And
Yeah.
I think we bring that into the sound of Blondie today. It's kind of the sound of New York, CBGB, if you will. There's elements of that in the sound of the band to this day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, by all means, it's, Blondie has always had its own, sound, its own uniqueness. And it was just kind of cool for me to like really dig into these tunes with almost like
there's a lot there.
fresh ears. Yeah. And hear all that, all that stuff. And, you've told me too, I mean, I knew you had a great relationship with Hal and with Earl Palmer, and,
Yes.
and, how much those guys were, like all of us, influenced, but listening to their songs on the radio as kids.
Right. Exactly.
And I always love that about you, that you always would acknowledge, their influence on you, and how you approach playing songs. And
I mean, of course, they influenced people like Charlie Watts and Ringo Starr as well, so it
Yeah.
kind of like continues that inspiration, follows through. And yeah, they were two of the best. I mean, what they did with all those, everything, obviously, as we know, from the Monkees to the Beach Boys to Phil Spector to Earl with Eddie Cochran and Little Richard and Fats Domino and Hal with on the Nancy Sinatra stuff. And I mean, it's just
Yeah.
amazing catalog of songs that the both of them played on, which we were hearing on the radio and being influenced by, unbeknownst to us. We didn't know their names at the time, but as time went on, people, we would delve into things like that and find out more history of what those songs were about, and then come to realize that Hal and Earl were the ones really influencing everyone at the time.
Absolutely. Yep. And would you say, so you probably started, how old were when you started playing drums?
I was probably right around probably just preteen.
Just
Actually.
preteen, yeah.
Yeah,
Just
when the Beatles, Ed Sullivan, all that.
all that stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Four
And
Seasons. I was big on the Four Seasons too.
yeah, the Rascals too, Dino Danelli.
Well,
or-
yeah, Dino, of course. Yeah, I mean, I would get compared to him sometimes. I'd be like spinning the sticks and things like that.
Yeah.
Dino was great as well. Yeah, big influence,
Yeah.
for
And
sure.
you know Ringo a bit, right?
Well, I've met him. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've met him.
yeah.
We did a thing with for John Varvatos, the clothing designer, when Ringo was like kind of like the face of the fall line of John's clothes, and there was a thing up in the Hollywood Hills, not at Ringo's house. So the drums were set up, and various people would walk in and out of the set, and I'd play a little bit on the drums, and it was people like Chad Smith and Trey Cool and Jim Keltner, and actually Steven Tyler, bunch of people. So we were all up there at this house hanging out, and Ringo's drum kit was there, and everyone could sat down and almost inevitably would try to play one of Ringo's licks. I remember Chad sat down and was playing the Tomorrow Never Knows, the boom dop boom ba ba boom, and Ringo said, "Oh, no, hold it, doesn't go like that," because Chad was doing the sort of eighth note thing with two hand, do it like that, but of course it's like kind of like what I say, like do it like that. So Ringo got up and showed him that it was like that. And, it was a great time, to be up there and hang out with him. And but I mean, I don't really know Ringo, but it was cool to do that thing with him.
Well, I wondered if you ever talked to him about the similarities in the way you guys play. I wondered if you.
Yeah, no, not really.
Yeah.
I'm good friends with Zach, with Zach Starkey.
Yeah.
I went, Zach took me to his dad's house when I first met him, and he had the Keith's Moons, the final set, the white set with the extra toms at the front and all. And we went out to Ringo's house, and we went to there's a guest house on the property, and we set up the drums and played those drums. So Zach and I, we've been in contact ever since. He's the perfect drummer for the Who, that's for sure.
He sure is, man.
Keith Moon was like his uncle, So,
yeah. So I agree. Zach just kills that gig. I just, and I know, I don't know Ringo well either. And I just know that it's like, if you catch him at a time when he really wants to talk about that stuff, he'll talk with you all day about it. And other times, he just doesn't want to get into all that kind of stuff. So I totally get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with the box that we have now, the archival box, it's kind of nostalgic, but funny enough, in between the tour that we did in the UK and the follow-up in the US, we recorded a new album as well in New York. So we kind of like have both things going on. We have the looking back at the archive, and we have a new album due to come out in the spring of next year. So it was a little less nostalgic for us, because I understand Ringo not wanting to look back all the time. A lot of people are like that. It's kind of a on record, anyway, most of the things, but sometimes you don't want to look back, you want to move forward.
Yep. No, I get it. I can only imagine, in Ringo's case, that everybody just wants to talk about, all that stuff. And you want to, you can't just live in that zone forever. So Absolutely. So that's
I think,
exciting for you guys.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I think it's great that Ringo, out has the all-star band, gets out and plays and does his thing. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it is. And I was just going to say that it sounds like you guys will be probably touring again next year if you've got a
Yeah,
record coming out in the spring.
yeah, we will be. We will be doing more next year. We've been getting some really good offers for festivals for next year. Yeah, we're going to keep going for a while.
That's great.
We do it at our own pace, so it doesn't get too grueling for people. I mean, obviously for me, I'm always out doing something. I mean, I would play as much as possible, but you got to take breaks sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to do a little tour in the UK and in Spain I did a record with a band called the Split Squad. Came out on a small label out of Spain. We're getting ready to go over to Spain and to the UK in November with that. As an album called Another Cinderella that came out recently.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, so like between now and when Blondie starts working again next year, are you going to, keep doing stuff? And there's my answer. Yeah. So you'll
the latest thing I'm doing, I'm going over to get my second honorary doctorate from Chichester University, and that's happening in October.
Wow.
And there's going to be a bit of a celebration for that, and because I have that Clem Burke drumming project that had been ongoing for many, many years. That was started by a professor, Marcus Smith, at the university in Chichester University, and he was Olympic boxing coach. He's a sports medicine doctor, and he was making the obvious analogy between drumming and sport. And that's been ongoing for many, many years now. So I'm getting another doctorate for my part in that. So
wow,
kind of proud about that. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
more or less the figurehead of it. They do lots of other things now with lots of other drummers, but we kicked it off by him studying me over a long period of time, coming up with a thesis and, having it, followed up by various organizations, and it's ongoing. It's interesting if people want to check that out. It's the Clem Burke drumming project, it's called.
Yeah,
but obviously any drummer knows how athletic, how physical drumming is,
Absolutely, yeah. And the original doctorate that you got in, I think I made a note of that. Was it 2008?
Yeah, from Gloucestershire University. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was the effects. Analyzing the effects of physical and psychological effects of drumming. So that was a different study. Yeah.
Well, no, it's an ongoing study.
It's an ongoing
It's still
study.
ongoing. Yeah, it's still ongoing.
Same thing.
And
okay.
But I'm just going to be. I'm getting another doctorate now from this other university, which is great.
Gonna have to call you Dr. Clem, I think.
Right. Some people do call me that. The crew calls me that sometimes.
All right, I will call you that from now on.
All right.
Dr. Clem.
Right.
Man, I made some other notes here just in the continuing efforts of me geeking out at your drumming that I've been a big fan of, as you know, for a long time.
Okay.
And I was, listening to some of these songs, and I remember when you guys, and I don't want to use the word reformed, but I remember it was the late 90s when I saw you play. Jim McGaffey and I came to see you play, in fact, in Boston. Right. And the record, and I forgive me for not knowing the name of the album, but the song Maria was the single from the record that was out at that time.
Yeah, it was called No Exit, the album. Yeah.
No Exit. Okay, yes. And I just, today I listened to that song again this morning, and I remembered there was a great drum fill, and I waited for it. And I made a note. It's like, for all you drummer geeks at home, check out this song if you don't know it, Maria. And at 3 minutes 42 seconds, you play this. You know the fill I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I'll kind of out on the fade. It's kind of like a Hal Blaine thing.
Yeah. But really like Hal Blaine, meets like Max Weinberg in terms of how fast it is. It's just this really fast. Yeah.
Yeah. What was that thing with Spector apparently telling Hal to hold back until the end of the songs all the time, and then just kind of go wild? Then he gets just a triplet thing that's kind of his trademark, and various other kind of fills and things. Well, when I'm in the studio, I constantly, actually, always quite a bit think of Hal and Earl. Tell you the truth, yeah.
That's great, and that totally explains it, because I was going to say throughout the song you're totally restrained. I mean, you're playing great solid groove.
Right.
I think the only fills that you're sort of playing are like little cymbal crashes and just little
5-stroke things going on.
Yeah, to transition to the next section
Yeah.
of the song, and then that fill happens at the end, like you say, during the fade. And it's, I like re-listened to it a bunch of times. It's so
Oh,
I can't
wow.
even, yeah. I mean, the sticking between the tom tom and the snare drum, it's great, really
Thanks.
great. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
absolutely.
that song was, it was a big hit for us in the rest of the world, and it was #1 in the UK, and it was perfect to begin our so-called comeback, which is really what it was, because we had stopped for almost 15 years, and my friends would always tell me that they thought that we would get back together at some point. I wasn't quite sure about that or not, and kind of just got on with my life, working on with other bands and doing other things, and but now we've been together longer. Chris, Debbie, and I have been together longer this time than the first time we were together. So it's pretty amazing,
That
because like you
is,
said, it
yeah.
started in the late '90s, and we essentially our kind of manifesto was to make new music. It wasn't about just getting back together to play the hits. So we took our time, to make a new album at that time, and we worked with the producer Craig Leon, who
Mhm.
co-produced our very first single. Craig produced the Ramones' first album and lots of other things. So it was great to kind of came full circle to work with Craig and to do that album, and it was great.
Yeah, it's a great record. Yeah, absolutely. And just jumping back for a second too, when just talking about the early stuff, the hits, and just the records from the '70s and early '80s.
Mhm.
Were you playing to, like, in a lot of those, like Heart of Glass? Are you playing to a sequencer on that song? Is there a?
Well, actually, it was before the days of MIDI. And
Yeah.
what we did really was in conjunction with the arpeggiated sequencer pattern, which would go out of time after a measure or two, because it was an analog synthesizer, Roland synthesizer. So what we were doing was really, I kind of built my own click track with the bass drum. So we just did the quarter note bass drum in time with the 32nd note sequencer pattern, and we had to do it very piecemeal because it would, as I
Wow.
said, it would go out of time. Or so I laid down the quarter note bass drum, and that essentially was the click track for that song, and then I played all the other drums on top of that, and we just programmed we recorded the synthesizer and the bass drum together,
I
piece
see.
piece by piece.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
how it started, and then the rest of the stuff was on top.
Because when you listen to it, it sounds like if you made that record today, you'd have a click track, you'd have a sequencer or something, to line
Right.
everything all up the way it's all lined up. But
Yeah, it would be MIDI'd, and the sequencer would be MIDI'd, and the click track so it would be in complete time. Yeah,
yeah,
perfect
yeah,
time.
that's
Yeah.
amazing that you were
Yeah,
able to
we had
do
to
that
build
then.
that up. Yeah, we had to build that track from the bottom up that way. It was a work. It was a bit of work, it took some time. Because I mean, I had to just sit there and just do quarter notes on the bass drum in conjunction with the sequencer pattern. It's, not the most exciting thing to be
No.
doing. But it worked out, definitely worked out. And we thought we were experimenting with electronic music. We never thought it was going to be the hit that it became.
Yeah.
And it was a
Well,
big open door opener for us in the States.
it's, I remember when you were nice enough a year ago to come on the tribute to Charlie Watts, that
All
show
right.
that I did, which was great. And thanks again for doing that. And you made the comment about, Charlie having Miss You, and you and Blondie, you having Heart of Glass. And I think you mentioned Carmine, Do You Think I'm Sexy? But,
Right.
you know, I think Charlie would forgive me, but, there's like Heart of Glass has just so much going on. There's just so much. That's such a happening tune. You could never dismiss that as as another disco song. I think anyway. I think it's just, it's just a great feeling tune. As is Miss You, of course.
Yeah, the Heart of Glass, I mean, it kind of has a new wave attitude to it, or a punk
Yeah,
rock attitude at the same time of it being a dance song. And yeah.
that's it. Yeah, and Debbie's voice, of course. I mean, she's, just one of the all-time great singers that you know,
Now Debbie's
let's me
great. I
not
mean,
forget. Yeah.
her glamour gets the glamour it has it where people overlook her creativity and her amazing songwriting talents, and especially with the lyrics. Debbie's amazing.
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
to this day,
Absolutely.
she's great. I was very lucky to meet up with her and Chris back when, and we struggled to make things work. People dropped out of the band. I brought my high school buddy in, Gary Valentine, who had never played bass before, to play bass in the band. And, things like that. We just kind of had a few years of getting it together and kind of workshopping our material in public, at CBGB. I always make that analogy of CB's being a kind of a workshop, that just could go in there and basically do whatever you wanted to do and see how it was accepted. It wasn't about being completely perfect. It was just kind of about, playing and just kind of letting it all happen and see where it went from there, and it was a big help having that venue for all the bands back when.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, big time.
But the fact that you guys all believed in what you were doing,
Right. Yeah.
that's also, you got to have that. And just to back up for 1 second and, talking about what you did to sort of build up from the bottom of Heart of Glass, had you had any experience prior to that? Because those were the early days of like sequencers and click tracks. And had you had experience playing along to a click or something with, time that was,
No, I mean, we didn't really use a click track on any of the Blondie records, back in the day. Sometimes producer Mike would be in the studio conducting us and conducting me, or kind of helping the track move along. But no, that was an experiment. We had that early rolling drum machine, and that to put that, sync that up with the drums and everything was a bit of a job too, because to make it all be in time, and have it work, a lot of things going on there. But no, I hadn't had any, I was always open-minded to any ideas people would come up with, in the studio, see how it would go. That's a big thing. I think when you're working with other people, especially if you're a drummer, you have to be open-minded to other people's ideas and, bring your ideas in, but just kind of be up for trying things out, not to dismiss things like immediately, like, oh, that's not going to work, or just kind of go, kind of work together.
Yeah.
But that was the first attempt at doing something like that.
Yeah.
Then we followed that up when we did the song Atomic on the E to the Beat album. Kind of a similar thing as far as working with sequencers and drum machines.
Yeah. And when you do that song live now, is there like a click going on to keep it all?
Oh, Heart of Glass?
Yeah, Heart of Glass.
Yeah. There is the drum machine and the click. It's all MIDI together now. Yeah. I play to a click. The live show is about maybe 40% to clicks and programs, and the rest is freeform. It's a good balance. Certain songs, when there's sequencers involved and programming, you got to play to a click, to keep it all in sync.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy playing to a click. It's great. It's really fun.
Yeah. You're obviously really comfortable. You're really,
a lot of times I'll start the song before the click starts, just to make people a little anxious. And then when the click comes on, it's in time with the song anyway. So that's funny.
That's pretty great.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be me. No, I remember seeing you do Heart of Glass, and I thought I remembered you seeing with maybe headphones at the time.
Right.
Yeah. And those, because you get to really stretch at the end of the tune, you start playing all those fills during the sort of the vamp, and it was just right there. It was like, just perfect. Everything was right in there. And
that's definitely to a click, because the sequencer's going in, the drum machine's going.
Yeah.
Those programs are happening during the body of the song.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Man, we covered a lot of stuff here.
Cool.
I won't keep you much longer. I did want to just mention that I know I have this old Premiere set here that I wanted to have here in your honor, but you've been with DW for a long time now, so I didn't want to overlook the fact that you've been, happy and playing their drums for a long time too. And so if you want to give them a shout out or.
Well, DW, I mean, they're having their 50th anniversary right now, and we think we talked about offline. They're obviously they made a merger with Roland. Surprisingly enough, they've announced today, which I think is pretty interesting. The DW drums are great. I mean, I started playing them when I was doing a residency at at my friend Don Randy's club, the Baked Potato, they had a DW set there that they kind of DW endorsed the club, which rightly so. It's a brilliant place. And they were about to switch out the kit. And I inquired about what was going to happen to that kit that was going to be kind of taken out of the club. And I managed to get a hold of it. And so I really enjoyed that kit. And also when I would be touring, when backline was provided, 9 out of 10 times a DW kit would be provided. It was always great. And so, yeah, I just kind of, and also, you know, they were local, really, DW, and they're just really great, really take care of their artists. And, you know, DW were great drums, but they went through a lot of changes. The company went through a lot of changes over the years. I think they're kind of back up and running now a little better than they were before. But I cherish my old Premier kits, but the drums that I use today, DW, really work for me in all different situations. So
yeah.
great
drums, great
drums.
people.
Yeah. They're all great. They're the people. Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, so you're in LA right now. So do you spend more time out in LA than you do in New York these days? Or are you?
Yeah, but I go back and forth, you know, quite a bit. I'm in New York all the time too, you know, kind of bi-coastal, have been for a really long time. But yeah, that's kind of, but I'm in LA right now. And, you know, there's a lot going on here. When I first moved here, it's like, you know, session wise, I was working with Nancy Sinatra quite a bit and, you know, playing at the Baked Potato and things like that. So it's fun.
That's great. When I met you, you were living out there, and I was surprised. And you know, in the late '80s, I was surprised that you were there. And I think you said, "Yeah, well, I still have a place in New York. You know, I'm in New York a lot, but I think of you as a New York guy. You know,
right? I mean, the band's based in New York. You know,
yeah. But you know, like you said, LA. I mean, especially, you know, for session work and those types of things that you're talking about. You know, you're smart to have the bi-coastal, you know, aspect of it, because that's where you're gonna have those.
Yeah, it worked out for quite a while, you know, but I wouldn't really consider myself to be a session drummer, but I've done a lot of different things lately. I did the band Echo and the Bunnymen. I recorded their new album that's yet to come out. I did that in the UK. And I just did an album with a band called the Rock Cats that were around back in the time. They have a new album coming out, and I just did a session with, of all people, Anne Margaret, the actress Anne Margaret. She has a record coming out, and a few things like that along the way. Always doing something like that. But
that's great.
Yeah.
Great, Clem. Well, I so appreciate you doing this today, and I want to thank you. And is there anything in closing you want to mention, or you mentioned we talked about Against the Odds, which people can go out and buy. Highly recommend it, and new Blondie record next year, and all sorts of other things. So
yeah, well, there's a documentary that Sky Arts did about me in the UK. That's kind of out there. It never got an official release in the States. It was released in the UK. It's called My View, Clem Burke, My View. That's kind of out there somewhere in internet land. And been working on a memoir that possibly will come out sometime next year. And, you know, things like that. During the pandemic, I started to work on those kind of things.
Great.
But I just want everybody to be nice to one another. You know, it's just like such a crazy time still. And hopefully we'll get through all this, and, you know, things will get a little better as time goes on. But I appreciate you having me on, John. It was great. Great to see all your drum kits there lined up there.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. So we'll see each other again soon, I guess.
We will. If you hang on 1 second, I'll end the stream and then we'll say goodbye. But I want to just thank Clem for being here. Thanks for watching, everybody. Appreciate it. A lot of great comments here, Clem. Aaron Comus says hello, by the way.
Hello, Aaron.
And lots and lots of people say hello and send you their best. So thank you so much for being here today. Big hand for Clem Burke, everybody. And thanks for watching.